Over the next few weeks, we will be interviewing the authors from the collaborative book, The Grief Experience: Tools for Acceptance, Resilience, and Connection, which is set to release in February of 2024. These authors have each experienced their own unique grief journey and will be sharing their personal stories with us. We will also explore the specific tools they used to cope with their grief and how these tools can benefit others who may be going through similar experiences. Grief is a complex and challenging process, and each person's experience is different. By sharing our stories and tools, we hope to provide support, guidance, and comfort to those navigating their grief journey. Each author has experienced different types of loss and comes from a variety of backgrounds, beliefs, and experiences. As a result, they offer valuable insights and perspectives. We are honored to have them join us on this podcast series and to share their stories and tools with you, our Path 11 podcast listeners. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Path 11 podcast. I'm so excited that you are here with us today, and we have another great show for you. I'd like to introduce you to Tiffany Thomas. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist who is in Los Angeles, California. So for all of you California listeners, I'm bringing somebody from the West Coast on the show today. And Tiffany began her career over 10 years ago as a drug and alcohol counselor, helping those using substances. And after a few years, she realized she wanted to work with others on their reasons for why they were coping with drugs and alcohol, and decided to pursue a degree in clinical psychology. She has a small private practice, and so those of you, if you are looking for a therapist, well, we're going to find out if she has any openings, and we'll find exactly where she's located in California, but she does have a small private practice and is passionate about helping others work on healing from grief, substance use, trauma, and abusive relationships. So if you're going through any of that, this is definitely a show you want to continue to listen to, because she's going to share some of her story, some of her expertise. And the other exciting thing is she is one of the authors that I am co-authoring the Grief Experience book with. And so it's really exciting to be able to meet her and to have her on the show and to hear how she is going to contribute to this book. And we're actually, pre-recording a lot of these episodes. Our book is scheduled to be launched in February of 2024. So we are recording this a little bit beforehand. And before we actually have had our meeting with the publicist to figure out what are we going to write. We all have kind of a little bit of a loose idea, but we're still waiting to have those meetings. So when the book comes out, Tiffany might write something totally different, as will I. So we don't know, but we're trying to figure it out as we go. So just wanted to let you guys know that as well. And so Tiffany, welcome to the Path 11 podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you. And it's so refreshing because a lot of times, I talk to a lot of different authors on this podcast, and we talk a lot about spirituality, life after death, consciousness, lots of different topics. But many times they aren't people who are in the mental health profession. And, I consider a lot of the people that I've been interviewing for this book part of my peer group. So we can kind of have more of a discussion on the level of like clinical psychology, which was also my kind of home base before coming into a lot of spirituality. And I really feel like mental health and spirituality go hand in hand. People who are really working on themselves and looking to reflect on themselves are also pursuing, I think, some sort of spiritual quest too, to figure out like, who am I and how can I be a better person? So I'm really excited to have you here and have you representing Los Angeles. So I'd like to know just a little bit more about you and your background. How did you decide that you wanted to get into psychology and specifically working with people who were struggling with drugs and alcohol? Because that is a very tough field to say, oh, sign me up for that,
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I actually started out as a hairstylist. That was my first career. I had done that, I think, for about 6 years. And I had just realized that I wasn't passionate about it. It was hard to build up a clientele. I was working in salons. And it just wasn't fitting for me. And at the time I was kind of reevaluating a move and, if I moved, would I want to kind of start over and continue being a hairstylist, or would I want to switch careers? So I really started to think about what did get me going. What amped me up? What energized me? And I started thinking about my own family history with alcoholism and how that impacted me. And so that really led me down the path to going back to school, becoming a drug and alcohol counselor. I did that for a few years. I worked in all different treatment settings, from residential to detox to outpatient, sober living. And I did that for a few years. And then I started to go, okay, once you take away the coping skill, what are you kind of left with? Um, and that's really kind of the meat of it. That's where everything kind of stems from. And we all are impacted by our own history and childhood and relationships and, who had an impact on us in our development. And so I realized that was really at the root of what I wanted to do.
Lovely. Yeah, I can totally relate. My audience knows that, my mom struggled a lot with addiction, both alcohol and drugs, and, being a child of an alcoholic and, going through a pretty just crazy life, it seemed like, moving a lot and quite a bit of trauma and, dealing with her, relapses and things of that sort. It was just kind of ongoing really until her death about 3 years ago. So yeah, I hear you. And I actually had the opposite reaction. I didn't want to work with anybody that was dealing with alcohol and drugs. And if somebody came into my private practice, I'm like, all right, you got to go and you got to get that substance abuse help. And then you can come back to me. I just don't specialize in it, and I think it was just hit too close to home in many ways. So I dealt a little bit more with people going through, the PTSD, anxiety, trauma, and things of that sort. So I ran from it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when I started therapy myself, I think I was 14 or 15. And at some point, my therapist had said to me, like, have you ever thought about being a therapist? And I said, oh, no, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. The last thing I want to do is listen to people talk about themselves all day. No, no, no. And then look where I am now.
Here we are. Yeah. Yeah. So, I like the fact that you were also talking about it sounds like you were really immersed in all aspects of addiction therapy and counseling, but then you went back to try to help people figure out the why. Why are you choosing this? Why has this become a coping skill? So, have you found the answer to that question? What's the connection to a lot of people who struggle with different addictions, and what are you seeing as kind of the core foundation or any types of theme that is happening in people's lives?
Gosh, great question. If I had the answer, I feel like I'd be a millionaire. I don't have the answer, but I think, a lot of it stems from dissatisfaction and contradictions. I think I work with a lot of people who their behaviors might not be in line with actually what they value and what's important to them. They're not aware of that on a conscious level. So there's an anxiety that's underlying, there's an insecurity that's underlying. I also think that our relationships are a huge piece in just how we feel and whether we're happy and whether we feel satisfied, whether we're fulfilled. Whether you have good or bad relationships with your family, your coworkers, your friends, your children, your parents, or even just yourselves. At the end of the day, do you like who you go to bed with? And if the answer is no to any of that, people have a tendency to want to escape from those feelings. So, it might not be drugs and alcohol. It might be food. It might be sex. It might be exercise. It might be, something else. I think to some degree, we all have that. I think Candy Crush is probably my coping skill I spend way too much time doing. But we all have it to some degree, and some people struggle with it a little bit more.
Yeah, I kind of think like from the spiritual aspect too, it's like as souls, we come into this planet Earth and it's loaded with lots of stuff to get addicted to, right? There's like healthier addictions, but then, I kind of wonder if part of our lesson of being here is learning about moderation, right? Because it's like if you look around, everybody has some sort of addiction, I think, and mine's probably music and going to live music concerts. but yeah, so I think that, it's a challenge and we're here and we have lots of goodies and lots of good food and sugar and, alcohol, drugs. And I think for some people too that have struggled with, a lot of trauma, people sometimes don't really feel comfortable being inside their body. And, that addiction, either that substance or getting that hit off of going shopping or gambling kind of like allows them, I think, some of that relief to kind of escape up and out. I don't know if you'd agree or not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You're just talking and I was thinking about, the importance also of not looking at someone that might be using drugs and alcohol as someone that's weak or someone that's a failure. And it's so much more complex than that. There's so much of a spectrum also with, coping with drugs and alcohol. Not everyone is either an addict or not an addict. Um, there's just a lot more nuance to it. And so I get really excited about my background and being able to work with people that um, just get to live in that gray area, that aren't just going to come in and be labeled as one thing or another.
Yeah, I agree. So I'd love to hear how you got involved with the grief experience and how, co-authoring a chapter in this book kind of came into your life.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I would say, like within the last year or so, I've actually been contemplating writing a book in general at some point in the future. But it was just kind of this idea that I was like, probably never going to happen. Seems very hard. I don't know. Um, and I'm part of this therapist group on Facebook, and someone had posted in there, "Hey, we're putting a book together with a variety of authors to talk about grief." And I think the timing just really was perfect. Going through the middle of my own divorce, and feel like this would be a good opportunity for me to kind of write out what it was like for me. For my own healing, but also to test the waters a little bit on what's it like to write something that's going to be out there and be in a book. So, as soon as I talked to the person that was putting it all together, I was like, okay, this is something I definitely want to be a part of. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you're bringing, like a different spin or dynamic on it. I think that there was a couple of authors too that are talking about a different type of loss. This book is all like comprehensive of all different types of grief, and divorce is definitely one of them. So, do you want to bring us through just a little bit of your process of just what the grief and loss has been like for you as you've, been moving through that?
Yeah, sure. So it's really interesting because I would say that I'm somebody that I function well and I don't uh, tend to show when I'm struggling or when I'm upset, which I learned in my own process was a little bit of a double-edged sword because other people didn't know I was struggling and they assumed, she seems okay. And so I really had to learn to reach out and be direct and say, hey, actually, I'm really struggling today, or this is really hard, or this is coming up for me. Um, but yeah, it's really, I keep saying interesting, but it really is. Like looking back, I've been thinking about the process, and it's a little over a year ago that my ex and I separated, and the divorce was final just this last February. Um, but I started having symptoms of grief, like I'm sure there were some before, but immediately after I was out of the marriage, I didn't know it was grief. I thought that I was very stressed. I was having some memory problems that were really concerning to me. I was constantly tired and exhausted, not sleeping well. And finally went to the doctor. Everything was fine, and I'm like, what is going on? I don't understand. I've never felt this way before. Still didn't think it was great, but I'm just really stressed. I had gotten a promotion at work, so I thought, oh, it must be stress from getting promoted. Um, and then I was at this grief training actually last fall, and they were talking about the physical symptoms, and all of a sudden it clicked and I went, oh my gosh, I've been labeling what I've been feeling as stress, and it's not stress, it's grief. And I mean, that was months and months of going through it before I even realized that that's what it is. And I think it just goes to show, yes, I'm a therapist, but when it's yourself, you do not have the same insights and awareness as you want to have or you think you have. So once I realized, oh shoot, this is actually grief, I was able to be a little bit more proactive, be a little bit kinder to myself about what the experiences was like. And that's just in the physical grief symptoms that I experienced, but all of the little moments of real visceral grief, that I experienced along the way, the feelings that I experienced along the way, and processing how people reacted to the news I was getting divorced. I mean, it was so much more um, complex. And to your point, I think, when people think grief, I would say most people think a death, the loss of a person to death. And my experience was different. The person is still alive, the relationship, memories are still very much alive. It just adds in another layer to the grieving process.
Yeah, absolutely. And still a lot of the same stuff, with grief as if somebody did die. It's like that first year, a lot of the anniversaries that go by, the birthdays, the memories or the places that you've gone, or if you're staying in the same town, and it's like having that whole just imprint of memories with that one person. And then, the physical act of having to move, or if people are selling houses together and then starting new. I remember when I went through my divorce, I was so mad the day that I had to go food shopping in my new place. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I have to buy all new stuff, new ketchup, new relish, just like all these little things that you're like not planning on that you already had stocked in your house, beforehand. It's just like literally just starting out fresh and new, and, all of those like just like small little things that could just trigger you and piss you off or make you feel really sad.
I know there's two things I think of when you say that. One is, I mean, it's been over a year and I'm still trying to figure out how to grocery shop for one without having to throw up bad. I still
Yeah.
haven't figured that out. But the other thing is, yeah, those moments of like just being exhausted from work and going, oh my gosh, I just wish someone else would take up the trash. And there's no one else to take up trash anymore. Or gosh, I really wish someone was here and could just cook my dinner because I'm exhausted. And it's like, oh, well, no, that's actually, not the life anymore. You have to do everything on your own and figure it out. And yeah, so all those moments, I mean, they still happen, over a year later.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember having those same exact moments. I remember the first snowstorm because I live in New York. I was like, God damn it. I got stuck. I had no snow blower. I was like literally shoveling for hours of like this 3-foot snowstorm. And I think I was cursing the whole entire time and crying. That was really raw, like after it had happened. So yeah, I've had those moments too. And it still sounds like you're pretty also raw in it. I mean, it's only a year out, and I remember somebody once telling me like all relationships are eternal. So it's like even if it's 10 years out, it's still like, you'll probably remember like, wow, I would have been married for, 11 years at this point, or whatever the case may be. So at where have you seen your journey from maybe the first couple of months to a year out, on maybe seeing your growth or your journey through the grief, and where do you feel like you are right now?
Yeah, I would definitely say I'm a lot more at peace. There were some, aspects of the relationship and also the divorce process, paperwork and all that was really stressful. And, I think I had a lot of anger, uh, was kind of the like initial onset feeling I would say that I felt, uh, which I think distracted me from really, the sadness and the hurt and the disappointment. So the sadness and the hurt and the disappointment are the more fresh feelings. Because that anger really hid that good for a bit of time. So yeah, I think I'm a lot more at peace. having the divorce finalized was really helpful in moving my process forward because, I wasn't waiting on my ex to do anything or we didn't have to communicate about anything. It's like, okay, I could officially, close that chapter and figure out how to live on my own. Um, and then I've really just learned to enjoy my own time. I feel, um, I don't want to erase, my marriage. I don't want to erase, um, the relationship that I had and what I went through. So I really try to be mindful to make room for little grief moments that come up. If I hear a song, if I have a certain memory, if there's a holiday, I'm really allowing room for those moments now and go, okay, yeah, today I'm sad or, I'm really pissed off that this thing happened 3 years ago or, this picture, Facebook. Thank you, Facebook, for reminding me of all my memories, It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm a lot more compassionate, with myself. And also, I've had to be really gracious about people in my life and not being hard on them for not saying the right thing that I wanted them to say. And that was hard in the beginning. People had a lot of different reactions and comments and opinions about things. And, um, but I realized that everyone's just doing the best they can. They're trying to support me, even if it doesn't sound to me like they're being supportive. And, but at this point, it's, over a year later. And when those moments come up, people aren't going to know. They're not going to be able to read my face. They're not living with me. So if I want support, I need to reach out and I'm in my own therapy or I have, some trusted friends that I can say, hey, you know, this grief is still here and still sucks. And, I really thought that I was going to be married the rest of my life. And, so yeah, I'm nowhere near being at the end of this grief journey. And I've had some other things change in my life that I think have, stirred up some of the grief, oh, this is reminding me unconsciously of some of the grief from the divorce. So I'm dealing with all that. But I'm really proud of myself and happy with where I'm at.
Yeah, I think what's, could be really helpful for some people who are listening to this, especially if people are in the midst of just starting this process, it could just feel so heavy, just like, a death and bereavement and grief with death. You almost feel like, am I ever going to get through this? Will this ever lift these emotions and these feelings? So I always think it's nice for people to hear other people's stories that are a little bit further out than them, where, now we can reflect back and say, hey, I'm a year out and I actually have found some peace. Yes, I'm still in some of these moments, but you'll get there, and it is very cliche that time heals all wounds, but there really is something with just giving these situations that we go through in life time and space and holding it, and so I think it's really inspiring to hear where you are in such a short, period of time. And I think one of your biggest takeaways too is like, if you're one of those people that has a hard time asking for help or showing, others where you're at, or you may be part of your friend group. Like I think most of us who are therapists are like the ones that like our friends come to. So when we're like in trouble, it's like, uh-oh, what do we do? April's usually the one, Tiffany's the one that, usually is the one that has the answers now. Am I supposed to have the answers, for her? So it can be hard for people to then switch roles for us if we've always played that role. So I really like that awareness that you have of reaching out and letting people know. Otherwise, they won't know. And people aren't mind readers and they're so busy with their own lives. And when you were saying, that the divorce, once the divorce kind of came through, I kind of always look at that when those divorce papers come in and the signatures are done, that's kind of the funeral, right? It kind of all of a sudden that it's like a ceremony and ritual that really kind of allows space to open up from that point. Because unless you have kids, if you don't have kids, then really there's no other communication, or we don't have to communicate unless we, decide to or want to. So Yeah, well, I'm really glad that you're going to be sharing this experience. And I know that you're still kind of working on what your chapter is going to be and maybe what that tool will be. So we're not going to reveal that in this episode. So you guys are going to have to buy the book and see, what that tool is going to be. So it's also really great for those of you who are listening to know that this book is a collection of all different types of grief. So it's not just death. So this could be a great book also for people who are going through relationship loss as well. And Tiffany is going to be one of the voices in this book on that. So as we come to a close, Tiffany, how can people find you? What is the best way? I know you're working on a new website, so we'll probably have that ready and in the show notes for people. But if they want to find you, what would be an easy way if they would like to come into your private practice? And do you have any openings?
Yeah, great question. So for now, until this gets released and we've got some updated information, I do have a Psychology Today profile. So you can search my name, and my office is located in Studio City within Los Angeles. So that's a good way to filter me and find me. I am seeing clients both in person and online, and I do have some openings. So feel free to reach out.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed our episode today, and I look forward to bringing you another guest later on. Take care, everyone.